Hello, my name is Colin Bennett, and I'm the Market Intelligence Director at the International Copper Association. I'm delighted to be opening this global event on the important and wide-ranging topic of industrial symbiosis and the role of inter-industry partnerships in reducing waste from copper byproducts. The research work that you're about to see was commissioned by ICA. Further details and materials are available from the ICA website, copperalliance.org. From today, you may also read about this research in the wider media. This event is in part a replacement for ICA output that you would have normally seen in person during London Metal Exchange Week and also at the CESCO Shanghai Conference, both meetings where the world of copper gathers to discuss trending issues. To further fill the airwaves in the coming weeks and months, you'll see in the media planned additional research from ICA covering topics including the circular economy, material demand, and power cable global trade flows. Turning to industrial symbiosis, ICA is planning a follow-up piece of research in 2022, and this will begin to quantify the industrial symbiosis opportunity for copper. And more details will be available mid next year. To the participants at this event, please do use the chat function to send us your questions live. Also note that throughout the event, association antitrust will apply. Therefore, we are unable to discuss issues such as price in this session. I will stay on the line. However, Simeon is the moderator for today. Simeon, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Colin. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Simeon Christophilidis. I'm Regulatory Affairs Specialist at the European Copper Institute, and today I have the pleasure of moderating this LinkedIn Live event. Before we begin, maybe we can get to know each other a little bit better. So I would encourage you to use the chat and greet everyone and let us know where you're watching us from. Starting from myself, I'm sitting in rainy Brussels. I'm very excited about the forthcoming discussions, and I would be very keen to know how broad our audience is today. All right, so as you know, or as you will get to know better today, the EU has assigned a prominent role on industrial symbiosis in the context of its circular economy action plan and its transition towards a green and a circular economy. This industrial symbiosis notion represents a sort of powerful tool to push the EU agenda towards decarbonization and climate neutral solutions. However, there are sort of some challenges that sort of impede the effectiveness of industrial symbiosis, and these are mainly attributed to the lack of awareness or lack of sufficiently motivating framework conditions, lack of recognition, or lack of evidence when industrial symbiosis takes place. So if you were seeking to get information on the opportunities that lie ahead for the copper sector from industrial symbiosis and have an exchange of views on what's in there for the copper industry, then I can reassure you you're in the right session. The event today will explore the role of inter-industry partnerships in repurposing copper waste and byproducts. And with that in mind, within ICA, we have identified that as a key element of circularity practices. And we have investigated, with the support of Arcadis, how an industry's resources can be a valuable resource in other sectors, bringing the most significant environmental and socioeconomic benefits, as well as mutual benefits for both actors on the field. So today we have the pleasure to have with us a deeply knowledgeable panel, and thank you very much for joining us to provide us their valuable insights on the matter. Starting from Dr. Alain Lassat, mining engineer in education, with extensive knowledge and experience in industrial-related issues in the field of recycling of non-ferrous hazardous waste into chemicals, broader sustainability aspects, as well as long experience in extended producer responsibility and regulation regarding product and waste stewardship. Alain is currently working as a senior consultant in Arcadis and is also Secretary General of the European Battery Recycling Association for over 10 years now. So he will provide us with an overview of their latest research on the industrial symbiosis in the copper industry. Together with us, we have also Daniela Solakova from Arubis. She is a corporate environmental and energy issues manager in Arubis, the biggest copper smelter in Europe and among the biggest ones worldwide, with production and sales sites in over 20 countries in 3 continents. So for having applied industrial symbiosis for quite some time, Arubis will give us a more in-depth understanding of putting in practice this industrial symbiosis, and let us know how a specific byproduct can serve as a safe and sustainable substitute for primary resources in a variety of applications. Last but not least, we have with us Olga Postlevich from the European Commission. She is working in DG GROW, the relevant directorate for the industry, infrastructure, entrepreneurship, and SMEs, and particularly in the unit of green and circular economy. So she will enrich our conversation by providing us an overview of the regulatory landscape and actually what are the Commission's plans and aspirations to allow industrial symbiosis to flourish among businesses. She has also worked in DG Environment for over 13 years now, and she has been covering fields around research and innovation, broader sustainability matters in smaller cities, as well as coordinating the research activities and DG Environment work area. So her expertise perfectly fits with the scope of the event, and we are very glad to have her with us today. So thank you all panelists for providing a very fertile ground for a fruitful discussion today. Before we begin, a few housekeeping reminders. So today's session is being recorded and will be available for viewing post-conference. You can check our website, copperalliance.org, where you can see the session recorded afterwards. Furthermore, each presenter will have a few minutes to make their introductory remarks, and they will be followed by a Q&A session. Meanwhile, if you have questions or any comments that you want to raise, I strongly encourage everyone to use the chat function, and myself, as well as my colleagues, will keep a close look at the chat and pick up the questions and address them to the respective panelists. Now let's welcome our first presenter, Alain Bassat, to walk us through the main results of his work on industrial symbiosis. Alain, please, the floor is yours.
It is using waste and byproducts salts.
Sorry, Alain, can everyone hear the presentation? I think there must be a problem with the audio, Alain. All right, we still don't have a sound, I guess. I see in the chat, people cannot hear Alain as well.
I think might maybe suggest, Simeon, that we go to the Arubis presentation and give Alain some time to rectify his audio with perhaps with Chelsea and so on. Daniela, is that going to be okay with you?
Yes, can you hear me?
Great, yes. So Daniela, we're very glad to have you with us today. So we're looking forward to hearing your in-depth experience from industrial symbiosis practices with the help of iron silicate. as far as I know. So looking forward to your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So first of all, I would like to mention that the Rubis is a leading provider of non-ferrous metals and large recycler. It's also important, I think, to mention that in the copper industry, there are many byproducts, products associated with copper production. And that's largely because copper plays the role of carrier metal. And therefore, in addition to copper, we produce sulfuric acid, precious metals, selenium, tellurium, lead, tin, nickel, sulfate, etc. So many metals. In addition, our processes are heat intensive, which means that there is a potential to use waste heat for district heating, where it can also contribute to reduction of CO2 emissions and decarbonization. But today we will only talk about one of the co-products that's called iron silicate. Iron silicate is, can you maybe move to the next slide? Yes, thank you. So iron silicate is an engineered mineral. It is similar to natural rocks or natural mineral aggregates. And it's largely used in essential fields of construction and where it can contribute to circular economy and climate protection by closing the loop and increasing resource efficiency, by saving natural resources and avoiding the need for quarrying, by preventing of waste also, because if it's not used, this material or product has to be turned to waste and landfilled. And it also has the potential to save carbon emissions in construction, therefore support decarbonization and industrial symbiosis. So environmental benefits of using iron silicate has been assessed in a life cycle assessment study. It has been included in the presentation of Alan, so I hope he can present it, but just to tell you that indeed we look at various areas, for example, comparing iron silicate as substitute for gravel, potential to substitute in cement, concrete, and calculated quite significant reduction of carbon emissions. What iron silicate is used for, as you can see here, we try to illustrate some of the applications, some also potential applications. It is used in hydraulic engineering for building embankments. It is used for road construction as sub-layer in building roads. One application is also as abrasive agent. Iron silicate is also used as iron corrector for clinker production. It has the possibility to be used in blended cements as substitute. It is used in concrete production as mineral aggregate. Some other applications I mentioned here. There are also possibilities to be used for asphalt. It's just to illustrate that there are possibilities. Some of them are already applied and some of them are under investigation. We believe that in the context of transition to circular economy and climate neutrality, it's important that policy encourage the use of secondary mineral aggregates and engineered minerals. That's largely because the construction industry is quite resource extensive. They're using a lot of natural resources and also they have quite high carbon footprint. We have tried to identify some policy recommendations and share with you. Some of them are related to the construction products regulation. For example, introducing minimum recycled content for secondary materials, or encouraging the use of secondary aggregates as a preference. Also favor products with lower carbon footprint and lower environmental footprint in general. Another area is related to the standards, construction product standards. In order to be used in constructions, materials have to comply with technical requirements which are defined in standards. However, the update of these standards is not necessarily up to the speed to uptake alternative materials. Therefore, we see some potential possibilities to stimulate the update of standards to cover engineered materials more timely, as well as maybe to change the way these standards are built to more focus on performance requirements rather than prescriptive list of ingredients in the future that could support innovation and uptake of alternative materials and low carbon materials. In general, we believe that sector integration and work together, cooperation between sectors should be encouraged and somehow incentivized. And we hope that in the developments, especially in Europe, within the Green Deal, there will be a possibility to stimulate the industrial symbiosis more. So this was my introduction very shortly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Daniela, for this insightful presentation. It's very useful for me, and I guess for the audience to understand how conceptual ideas like industrial symbiosis can be really applied in practice by the industry. And it's also very useful to know what kind of potential does iron silicate have to increase sustainability and circularity, as well as what kind of applications can it find, additional ones. So may I ask if Elan is here with us again?
Yes, I'm here, and I hope that you can hear me.
Great. Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Perfect.
Quickly pass you the floor to present us the results of the study on industrial symbiosis.
Thank you, Tor, and sorry for the small audio issue at the beginning of the event. I'm very pleased to present to you the key takeaways of our study about using waste and byproduct as a resource for copper. Next slide. Yes. So what's industrial symbiosis? Well, in short, industrial symbiosis is to capture, recovery, or reuse previously discarded resources from one industrial operations by another industrial operations, traditionally taking place between separate industries operating in close proximity. That's the generic definition of industrial symbiosis. And now let's deep dive a little bit more into this concept. Next slide. We identified a few key success factors for creating industrial symbiosis. The first one is that you need to extract a specific byproduct from your process with a desired quality or specifications that will fit a market, and then you need to find a market for it. Once you have this, you can try to create the industrial symbiosis by checking if you have a solid business case. That means if you can, if the whole thing is a profitable operations for both the producer of the resource and the user of the resource. We need to combine both of them. And then you can implement industrial symbiosis practices and you can start to beneficiate from some important benefits like environmental benefits, because you, for example, you discard resource from the landfill, but you can also benefit social and economic benefits for the actors involved in the industrial symbiosis. Next slide, please. There are, of course, some drivers and enablers to sustain industrial symbiosis. For example, it's important to diversify the industries. That means not to always look in your own sector, but to go outside your sector, go out of the box. An important driver is, of course, the geographic proximity to avoid unnecessary transportation or long distance. We need also some favorable legislations and policy. We need also to realize that there is a constant pressure now to reduce the pressure on raw materials and waste and the related costs. We can think about economic and financial incentives, even outside the one that can be implemented by the partners realizing the industrial symbiosis. we need also to, as enablers, to make sure that there is enough availability of the informations among the actors, because if nobody knows about what kind of byproduct you might produce, well, then the chance that you can find people interested in your byproducts is, of course, reduced. Another important enabler and becoming a pressure, by the way, it's the fact that the raw materials are costing more and more. And of course, waste treatment operations are becoming also interesting in a sense that if you recover the material from waste, then you can mitigate a little bit the high cost of raw materials. And then the last enablers is, of course, the trend of having more and more sustainability-oriented companies in the industrial sectors. Next slide. So the main conditions for realizing an industrial symbiosis is, for example, to have a specific legislations favoring industrial symbiosis practice. We can discuss this in more details. For example, the legislations in Europe about the end of waste or the byproduct legislation is certainly an important piece of legislations, but the circular economy action plan is also an important piece of legislation. We also need a matching system between the producer of the resource, the byproducts, and of course the potential users. And also this is an important point to suscitate ideas and new potential uses for the resources. Other conditions are, for example, the scarcity today or forecasted in the near future about certain resources. And of course, what is following this is the price increase of these resources. So it's important to check the possibilities of having industrial symbiosis in order to mitigate the price increase. And then in certain cases, of course, economic support could be considered. Financial aid, for example, to promote and share resources over primary raw materials, not only raw materials, but also energy, of course. Next slide. I will just briefly talk here about some specific European legislation supporting industrial symbiosis. So on one side, we have the Waste Framework Directive. This is the mother directive of all the environmental legislation in Europe. It's dated from 2008, but was revised in 2018. And it defined important concepts. For example, what we call the end of waste, or when a waste ceases to be a waste and becomes again a product and can be reused or reintroduced in a material flow. This piece of legislation also define the same equivalent conditions for a byproduct to become a product again and no longer a waste. Another important piece of specific European legislations is about the circular economic action plan that promotes the use of byproducts and end of waste materials as long as possible in the economic cycles. Next slide, please. Now let's go through some very typical example of existing industrial symbiosis. Of course, we are not going to cover all of them. We are just pinpointing 2 examples. First, we can talk about the case study of Boliden with a very strong attention on producing several byproducts extracted from the copper smelting. So not only you produce copper on one side, but on the other side, you can produce aggregate, zinc clinker, and even copper sulfate. And these 3 byproducts have all different uses in the industry. For example, the aggregates can be used as in the constructions, in construction material. The zinc clinker can be a source of zinc metal as such. And the copper sulfate can be used not only in the copper industry, but also in other industries as a chemical reagent. And this is a typical example showing that you can have various byproducts or resources that can become byproducts when you consider the overall production process. Next slides. Just now, you had a small introduction about the case of our iron silicates as an industrial symbiosis. And to give you a bit of a sense of size or importance of this industrial symbiosis, think about the fact that on average, 2 tons of iron silicates are produced per ton of copper metals, so twice as much. But on the other side, if you use these iron silicates in industrial symbiosis with other partners, you can save an extraordinary amount of CO2 equivalent. For example, if you use it as an aggregate in road constructions, you can save 11,000 ton equivalent per year. If you use it as a reactive mineral additive or in cement, you can even talk about 170,000 ton of CO2 equivalent savings. And if you use it for substitute in cement, you arrive to figures around 116,000 ton savings, CO2 savings per year. So it gives you an order of magnitude of the potential carbon saving you can achieve when implementing industrial symbiosis. Next slide. So iron silicate from the copper productions is an ideal candidate to replace natural aggregates in concrete productions. It prevents, for example, the extractions of raw material from quarries. It's also minimize the adverse environmental impact. And the copper slag, like the iron silicate, has also some very beneficial and suitable technical and mechanical properties to be used as concrete production, in the concrete productions. So we should not forget that sometimes a side resource or a byproducts can have very interesting mechanical properties or functionality properties to develop industrial symbiosis. Next slide. Another totally different example of industrial symbiosis is about the repurposing of batteries coming from electric vehicles. So to explain this concept, you think about your electric car and there's a battery, a lithium-ion battery most of the time in it. At the end of life of your vehicle, the battery is still functioning properly. It can be extracted from the car and it can be straight away recycled. There is legislations in Europe saying that all batteries must be recycled at the end of life. But you can do also something else. You can also take this battery out of the electric car, repurpose it. So you check the health of the battery, you repurpose it as a battery for storing electricity. This is called electricity storage systems. And we are building those systems more and more in Europe, or everywhere in the world, by the way, simply because so far we had a huge problem with electricity. It was the storing of electricity when the demand is lower than the productions and putting back the electricity on the grid when the demand is higher. And thanks to this repurposing of the electric batteries, we have an extraordinary industrial symbiosis because we provide a second life. So we extend the total life of the batteries and of course of all the materials that is included in the batteries. And no need to say that one of those materials is copper. We have quite a significant percentage of copper weight in the total weight of the batteries, and you can extend the life cycle of the copper by 5 to 10 years by repurposing the battery as a fixed storage system for storing electricity before going for recycling, of course, at the end. Next slide, please. And I think now I pass back the word to Simeon for the discussion.
Thank you very much, Alain, for this excellent presentation. It's indeed very interesting to hear the potential of industrial symbiosis, as well as the conditions that are needed to transform those sort of good practices into successful case studies. And I totally concur with the point you made earlier about the fact that the examples that are being shown are only indicative. There are also other copper byproducts that can enhance industrial symbiosis and its effectiveness. And there is also a broader array of industrial symbiosis practices, such as district heating, as well as other similar practices that can also enhance the effectiveness of industrial symbiosis. All right, now that we have the intro from Eliane, as well as the insights from the industry, I think it's time to welcome our third speaker, Olga Poslovich from the European Commission. Olga, I'd be very interested to hear your views on Eliane's presentation on the one hand and the results that you've heard, as well as what are the Commission's plans for in terms of fostering industrial symbiosis, or any information you can share on the regulatory landscape that can support and underpin such practices. Olga, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Simeon. Hello, everybody. Do you hear me well? Okay, I assume you hear me. Okay, so first of all, thanks, Alain, for this interesting presentation. I've learned myself something from the copper industry. Also, some of your facts echoing the study that DG Grow published in 2018, where we also analyzed the barriers and the benefits of industrial symbiosis. We did also a mapping in Europe. Where are the initiative for industrial symbiosis located? And from this mapping, we realized that as usually in the goal for circularity or climate neutrality, some countries are a bit in front and others are going behind. So we definitely need to harmonize a bit this picture and to make Europe in totally more circular. But before going to the policy landscape of industrial symbiosis, if you allow me, I would just go a couple of years back and from where everything started. So we, in 2019, in Europe, we have adopted the new growth strategy, the so-called European Green Deal. It's an unprecedented strategy, as we call it, the Europe First Man on the Moon, where sustainability becomes the mainstream in all policies. So thanks to the European Green Deal, we are going to change the way we consume, we produce, we build, we invest, we educate. Almost all policies, from agriculture to competition policies, they're all going to be transformed in a way so that we achieve a climate neutral and more sustainable future. So this is the first cornerstone, let's say, of why we are here today also probably. The second, it's 2020 March, where we have the second Circular Economy Action Plan, where the products, recyclability, the design, the reusability, all that is put in the focus, but also the pre-production phase, the pre-consumer phase. So it's not only about recycling, about bringing back the materials after the use of the product, but it's also about closing this industrial cycle, the pre-consumer cycle. So this is the industrial symbiosis, in fact, what we're talking about. So in this second Circular Economy Action Plan that Alain has already mentioned, there are two chapters where industrial symbiosis is mentioned one another way. The first one is circularity in production processes. There is a mention of the revision of Industrial Emission Directive. And I will continue a bit on that. The Industrial Emission Directive revision has started. The impact assessment is ongoing. And it's true that it has been realized that the current Industrial Emission Directive does not have enough focus on circularity and resource efficiency. Therefore, to fix that, there are some options under discussion. One option is to introduce in the BREF, so BREF for non-specialists, it's those best available technique reference documents, to introduce industrial symbiosis aspects in those techniques, in those reference documents, sorry. Another option is to have a national plans for industrial symbiosis. So we're really moving towards bringing industrial symbiosis on a national level. By the way, some countries do already that. And for example, I know that in France, they count the amount of symbiotic transactions. So it's a very basic, indicator, but it still measures this amount of how many industrial symbiosis transactions has been performed in France per year. So this is also where European Union is moving towards. It's to have a better overview, better monitoring of. Then coming back to the CAP, the Circular Economy Action Plan, the second chapter, it's creating a well-functioning EU market for the secondary raw material. When we were doing the study, we realized that one of the obstacles is the lack of harmonization of the byproducts criteria and end of waste criteria. So the Circular Economy Action Plan put that also as a goal, as an action to harmonize that between member states. So there are easier this symbiotic exchange also between member states. But it's not only that. So it's not only those two chapters. So we come back now to the existing legislation. So we have the Waste Framework Directive that Alan mentioned. And in the Waste Framework Directive, there is an article which says that by end of 2024, the European Commission will consider setting targets for reuse and recycling of industrial waste. The revision of this Waste Framework Directive has started. And indeed, one of the things that we will have to look at that, it's industrial waste, that's for sure. Another revision, again ongoing, already started. It's the revision of the European Pollutant Release and Transform Register, the so-called EPRTR. And it's also will contribute better to circularity. And one of the aspects that is going to look, it's in the potential requirements. So I really need to underline all the time that all the legislation that is under revision, it's just one of the options that we're discussing. So potential requirements for additional data on resource consumption, for example, the use of water, energy, and raw materials. So this is about the legislative part. Now, if we come back to the, but if we add to this legislative regulatory package, if we add the funding and the knowledge exchange, so here you probably know all very well all the different various projects that Horizon 2020 has contributed since 2014. The live projects, some live projects have created matchmaking tool. Again, Alan was mentioning about the need of facilitating the matchmaking. Then we have Interreg projects, we have cohesion funds, and now in the cohesion funds we have environmental chapter, which also can help those countries, because cohesion fund, it's only for some countries, so those countries to invest in the industrial symbiosis. Then we have European Resource Efficiency Knowledge Center, ERIC, and there is a dedicated toolkit which is currently under development that will include feedback and experience from organizations that have already implemented or participated in industrial schemes. So all that is to show that we are moving both directions. So the legislative part, we are moving also the knowledge part, the communication, the networking part as well. And there are many services in the Commission that are working together. It's the MyDG, DG Grow, it's DG Environment, it's Joint Research Center, it's the DG RTD, it's DG Regio, and some agencies. So we're working all together to ensure that there is consistency and synergy between all the different actions that we are doing. And in the end, I will mention one of the projects that we are running in DG Grow. It's the Circling project. we're establishing a network for the certification and the reporting of industrial symbiosis. This is mentioned also in the Circular Economy Action Plan, and we are finishing next year, and everybody is welcome to join. It's free of charge. So in the network, the people, the members will have possibility to do the self-assessment to identify the potential of having industrial symbiosis. There will be a matchmaking tool, also the European-wide matchmaking tool, and also there will be labels attributed for those who participate in this activity. And it's European-led network. You're welcome to join. You can Google that circular industrial symbiosis. And I think that's all from my side. We will definitely continue working on the industrial symbiosis. We may think about including an indicator in the future, but for the time being, we're accumulating this knowledge and this legislative base. Thank you, and I look forward for the discussion.
Wow, Olga, a lot of interesting information you shared with us. I took note of some very interesting points you made about funding mechanisms, knowledge exchanges that are needed also on the regulatory side, national industrial symbiosis plans, as well as harmonization of end of waste and byproduct criteria. Also the industrial waste reduction targets in 2024. So there's a big array of information that I hope the audience finds useful, because actually the industry will have to contribute to those discussions and help also the Commission move forward with this industrial symbiosis notion. So I really like this spirit of co-construction between the industry and policymakers, and I think this event comes really at a very good time. That the Commission is considering this wide array of opportunities to push forward the industrial symbiosis agenda. If I may start from you, Olga, actually, I was wondering, because you mentioned a lot of interesting points around the regulatory and research area, a lot of information. I was wondering, is there any sort of preparatory work at the Commission level or any sort of work stream that you're active in the Commission that you're working towards that, or any sort of platform where you are in contact with the industry, any sort of way that the industry can contribute to these industrial symbiosis activities?
Well, first of all, it's the circular network I have mentioned already. It's the we are creating this network. So the interested are welcome to join. There is lots of useful information there. There you will find like-minded companies. So those like you are here, you're anticipating the legislation. So you already feel that this is something that is coming up. The sustainability, the circularity is going to become a new norm in the production phase. Maybe not next year, maybe not in 2 years, but it will become. The political decision-making process is slow because it's a democratic process. We need to take into account the opinion of the citizens. We need to go through the negotiation with the parliament, with the council. So it takes time. But the strategy is there, the EGD is there, the action plan is there. So you know what to expect. And you already, with this study, for example, and with the industries already doing that, you're already anticipating the legislative actions. So you're the front runners. So in this network, in the circular network, you can find those like-minded. You can share good practices. But I've realized that this hunger for knowledge is still there. Although we have a lot of information already available, and during the last 10 years, the amount of scientific literature that you can find is increased 3 times. But there is still need of more knowledge, of more even sharing good practices, like the one you are doing here, where we can use the copper slag or this iron silicon that I learned for the first time. So all that is one of the deliveries that are planned under Hub for Circularity call. So there is a plan to establish such community of practice on industrial symbiosis. Again, it will take a couple of years because it's the Horizon Europe project, and Horizon Europe project is also, you need to publish that. It's already published, and you need to get applications evaluated and then start. But already the first step, the entry step, and sorry for replying long, but it's really, there is a lot of happening. Entry step, you can join the network, the Circling network, and try to find out whether your resources, whether your company could use the industrial symbiosis, whether we're using this self-assessment tool, you could just try from this. And then if you manage, you can go to the matchmaking, you start interacting with the other companies. So yes, that would be my suggestion.
All right, so we note Circling for participants to keep a note in case they are interested in learning more information, to look on the web. All right, I see meanwhile that a couple of questions are coming in, so I'd like to revert back to Alain at this stage. So Alain, I was wondering, so you made a nice overview of the industrial symbiosis potential. You heard also the Commission's views and the regulatory landscape and all the plan that is in the pipeline. So picking up the question about policies to support industrial symbiosis, and having heard that you have looked into the circular economy action plan on the one hand and the waste framework directive on the other, do you think that the current framework as it stands provides sufficient incentives for industrial symbiosis to bloom in the EU economy? Or do you think there is a sort of unmined opportunities for operators that is needed?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think the actual legislations in place are already providing a good basis for developing industrial symbiosis. What we notice in practice in the industry is that the concept of end of waste or byproduct is still unknown to a lot of industry and consequently underused. There are a few reasons for that. Some are simply not knowing about the possibility to declassify a waste back to a product when you have a use in the industry. The other point is that by doing so, you actually enlarge the field of possibilities, because if you are waste, you can only do one thing, is to send it to a recycler having a permit for handling waste, or a landfill if you want to get rid of it. But if you become a product, either a byproduct or end of waste, then you can place your product on the market to customers or to industries that have no license as waste handler. And that's open a completely new field of opportunities. It is, of course, something that is ongoing and that will certainly be further developed in the future, chiefly with the help of certain initiatives coming from the European Commission in order to facilitate the criteria, the publication and the definition of the criteria to enjoy this end of waste or byproduct status.
Great. I think that was crystal clear. So I understand that there is an unmined field of opportunities for non-waste operators, non-waste treatment operators in the field. Right. So now I'd like to pass to Daniela and focus a little bit more on the byproduct that you talked to us about, Daniela. So iron silicate. I was wondering, on the basis of the research and the studies you've been making, is the safety in its use demonstrated? And have you been facing barriers or any relevant challenges in terms of identifying new applications or further uses for iron silicate? I think that would be a good explanation for and a good point of reference for other byproducts as well.
Yes, so thank you indeed. As I already mentioned, so far, at least from our point of view, there are no incentives really to use the secondary aggregates. instead of natural resources, and indeed there are barriers to do that. So one barrier was already mentioned, and that's okay. We consider this, as already mentioned, iron silicate for us is a product. So it's a co-product the same way as many other of the metals we produce, but unfortunately, in some countries in Europe, this is considered a waste. So this has been already mentioned by Alan, and this could be a barrier. Another barrier is, of course, related to the standards that I mentioned, because, of course, to be used, we have to conform with technical requirements, which we do. But the standards that allow these materials to be put on the market are very slow. So they are harmonized standards for construction products. That process is very slow, and the process is not really set up in such a way to favor alternative materials. So it's very difficult to be listed sometimes in the standards. So this is one barrier. Another barrier is there are standards where iron silicate is included, for example, for road construction and for concrete. But in some countries, this is not still used because of some precautionary, let's say, approach on environmental protection. And that's to answer your question. We have done a very detailed assessment, risk assessment of this product under REACH. So there is a complete assessment of the hazards and the risk, and it's concluded that this material is safe, it's well documented. We have done extensive testing to prove that, but this is somehow not recognized by the market. So sometimes they are just precautionary approach. Okay, it's better to use natural materials instead of secondary materials. It's more, just easier for people. Also because, of course, the natural resources are widely abundant. In our case, this is crushed stone or minerals. They're everywhere. They're easily accessible. So there is, again, no incentive to use. So this is on the safety point of view, we have a lot of arguments, and it's quite clear. Also, we comply with national environmental criteria. Sometimes there are criteria related to leaching, where we can also demonstrate that material is safe, but it's not harmonized, let's say, this approach. And another maybe thing I could mention also, referring to what Olga emphasized, I'm very happy indeed to note this work from DG Grow on the certification of industrial symbiosis. So for sure we will be exploring this, but she also mentioned the Industrial Emissions Directive, and that could be another example. For example, in the case of non-ferrous metals BREF, already there is a BAT conclusion saying that final slag or iron silicate from non-ferrous metals has to be used in cement, in roads, etc., in order to prevent waste and industrial symbiosis. But this is not binding. This has not been a kind of a trigger to support this use. So we are happy that now with the revision of the Industrial Emissions Directive, this could be improved to support in this resource efficiency.
Great, thank you very much, Daniela. I think it's very interesting to hear that there are certain challenges that you've been facing, although you comply with national environmental criteria on leaching, as you mentioned. And I take note of some market barriers when secondary resources are not recognized or are not given the opportunity to foster sustainability of the economy. And I take note also of the standard setting procedures, which are low in some cases, leading also to additional challenges in finding new applications for iron silicate. I guess that would also be the case for other byproducts. So it's interesting for the audience to be mindful of these challenges. All right, maybe I can revert back to Alain, and I was wondering, Alain, from the literature review that you've made, what is your impression? Do you think there is enough information out there? Because I noticed in the chat there was one attendee who said, I'm not really familiar with industrial symbiosis. So do you think that there is enough information out there to inform the audience? And if not, where would you identify the knowledge gap that needs to be filled with further research and investigation?
Yes, what we have seen in our research is that most of the time you have the description of certain symbiosis, and then the author of the studies try to derive some high-level conclusions about the potential of industrial symbiosis. But this is always and most of the time based on specific cases. What we don't have is sectorial analysis, for example. And this, I think, it's an important barrier coming back and was mentioned already is the issue that there is not enough knowledge about industrial symbiosis in the industry in general terms. Another important point that was already mentioned is also that we have maybe too much draw the attention of the potential carbon footprint savings that we can realize through industrial symbiosis, but we need also to study the other environmental and social impact that industrial symbiosis can create for the economy as a whole. So I would say that we have data. We don't have enough data. There's still plenty of data to collect, but there's also another issue is to make sure that those available data are dispersed in the public, in the industry, so that people can realize the potential of industrial symbiosis. And I'm very pleased, of course, to concur to the various initiatives taken by the European Commissions to promote any kind of network matchmaking places to favor industrial symbiosis.
Thank you very much, Alain. That was very clear. Now I'd like to pick up a question from the chat, which is asking about how to quantify, or if there is a way to quantify the level of industrial symbiosis at national level, and if there is a sort of standard way or a methodology to calculate such a benchmark. And I'd like to address that question to Olga, because Olga, I mean, you've presented to us the regulatory landscape and what is in the Commission's pipeline, and we see that the political will is there. So if you are aware of any similar any relevant standard or methodology to define industrial symbiosis at national level that you could share with us, that'd be great.
There are so-called, for example, in UK, there is the National Industrial Symbiosis Program, NISP, so-called. I know that in some regions they have, there is Northern Regional Industrial Symbiosis, which covers Northern country, the network. Then according to our mapping, also there are some networks in other countries. There are in Germany, there are in France, in Italy. So there are different networks on industrial symbiosis. And according to the study that we published, the facilitated industrial symbiosis could help a bit, because especially for those who are not sure where to start from. There are more and more examples of the urban symbiosis, where you have also cities authority cooperating. So in case you have, for example, in case you have a very big construction plans in cities, so the industrial symbiosis is included from the designs. It's not that after, but from the design, there are already attempts to calculate, to see where there will be waste and how they can be used in other processes of that construction. So there are different work ongoing. I'm not sure whether I answered your question, Simeon. Please tell me, because I think I'm a bit lost.
I think, Olga, that gives an idea of how national level work on this field on industrial symbiosis can take place. And there was also a previous reference on the BREFs, the documents in the context of the Industrial Emissions Directive, which will possibly include industrial symbiosis as an option, and it will constitute also a basis for implementation at national level and to inform the national efforts on fortifying industrial symbiosis. So thank you very much for this. Meanwhile, I see in the chat two complementary questions. One is noting that industrial symbiosis and the relevance with the zero waste society. I'd say that this is these two are linked with, on the basis of the optimization of resources, and it's also linked to the comment right below about optimizing copper recovery and optimizing the resources that are being used. So I think it's these two are very pertinent comments, and thank you very much to the people who typed them in the chat. Right, I'm mindful of the timing, so if I can give the floor to each of you to give us a final remark. So what is the key takeaway from this event? And if you want to put one thing to the attention of the audience, what would that be? I can start from Daniela.
What to say? So as I already mentioned, the copper industry is really here in a very good position because we produce many copper products and we already try to industrial symbiosis. So I think I'm very happy, as already mentioned, that your Commission is also considering some opportunities. You sure try to take an advantage of this. And something that I didn't mention, but maybe it's important to mention in the context of the quantification, that's of course the, let's say, the performance assessment of the performance life cycle based maybe on life cycle assessment, environmental footprint, quantify, and that's why we have tried to do that already for our products, could quantify really contribution on saving of carbon emission, other environmental impacts of the life cycle. It will be useful. This is encouraged to put a quantitative measure as well.
Thank you very much, Daniela. Olga, looking forward to your final remarks and your key takeaways from this event.
Thank you. My takeaway would be I was curious to see the confirmation from Daniela that the harmonization of byproduct and that end of waste criteria is indeed a barrier for uptake of industrial symbiosis between member states. So the action that is planned in the Circular Economy Action Plan is therefore really important, and we need to follow this up as soon as possible. I was also very interested to learn about the copper industry. I must recognize I was not very aware. Being from the environment and working there for 10 years, I'm still in the learning phase for the policies of DG CRO. So that was really interesting for me and very useful. I will take it with me. I will use your study also whether needed, wherever I will have opportunity in the discussion with other European Commission services.
Thank you very much, Olga, and I'm very glad that you found this this opportunity an interesting and useful one for you to hear and get more information. So, Alain, your final remarks and your key takeaways from this event.
Yes, I would insist on the fact that we are really at the beginning of a new, not revolution, but a very strong change in the industry thinking, and that we should really have a proactive system to favor and to initiate the industrial symbiosis thinking within the industry. So we come back to the idea of knowledge sharing, best practice sharing, networking. I think that there are challenges, but they can be overcome. And we have already shown a very good example how to overcome the challenges and to create a long-term, sustainable and profitable industrial symbiosis. There are plenty of other possibilities. but we really need to make sure that the information is well shared, not only between the copper industry or the industrial sector, but also outside to initiate any potential future idea that we are not thinking of about industrial symbiosis. So we are at the beginning of a very strong industrial evolutions regarding that point.
Thank you very much, Alain, and thank you, the three panelists, for your interventions. To the audience, if you have questions, now that you've heard the presentations, feel free to reach out to us, and we are glad to address your questions or connect you with the respective panelists. So before closing the event, maybe I can give you an idea of the next steps. So we are going to launch in 2022 a follow-up project on industrial symbiosis, with the aim to quantify to the extent possible, and that answers partially the question in the chat previously. So quantify the environmental benefits from industrial symbiosis, as well as the market opportunities for the copper industry when undertaking such practices. And we are also planning to make some estimations of the copper waste avoidance from industrial symbiosis by 2030 and 2050, as well as model the market impact when such cross-industry partnerships in waste management are taking place currently and towards 2050. Of course, we will be communicating the results on our website, which I strongly encourage you to keep a close eye, copperalliance.org, as well as on our social media on LinkedIn and Twitter. Once again, thank you very much, dear panelists, for joining us today and for your very useful remarks. Daniela, Olga, and Alain, thank you very much, the team that made this event happen, Colin, Gabriel, Chelsea, and Nicole, and all the team that worked for this event. And a big thank you to the audience for joining our session today and for the very active participation. We look forward to following up with you on the basis of the new study, the follow-up study in 2022. And as I said, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be more than glad to answer your questions. And with that, I'd like to close the event and wish you all a wonderful rest of the day.